Welcome to A Night with a Medium, starring Tessa Del Zappo. Broadcasting live from the Yowawa Media Studios high above the beautiful city of Niagara Falls, New York. Thank you for joining us, and we welcome each of you for a spirit-filled evening.
Thank you so much for coming back on.
Oh,
I'm excited
great.
to have you back on.
It's great to be here.
Yeah,
And it's always good to talk to you. And
it is.
let me ask you a few questions, if you don't mind, because you're always interviewing everybody. And,
I know.
The last time I was here, we got to find out a lot about myself and, what I did. But I'm sure many people out there, and especially myself, are interested in you and about you, that they get a chance to learn about you. I mean, I know you're born and raised in Buffalo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes,
And,
absolutely.
That's where your roots are. And what I really wanted to know about you was, did you find out or feel like you were sensitive or that you had you were different, in other words?
It's weird.
What was your first experience?
It's strange because I think as I talk about it more, I realize more, I think, about myself as a child, and seeing my kids now, I'm kind of finally putting pieces together and watching them, and then thinking back to myself what they're going through, what I experienced. I really think that I was born, obviously, with that ability. And I think anybody who has the same ability as me was born with it. I do think that different levels of people can enhance whatever they have in life. But I think, to answer your question, I was probably around my son's age, like 4 or 5 years old, where I was seeing things. And I was in the hospital for a while. I was very sick as a kid. I had an infection in my body that almost went septic, and luckily Children's Hospital in Buffalo took care of me quickly. I had a surgery, but I remember being in the hospital and laying there because I had tubes coming out of me and epidurals and everything, and I was my son's age. And I remember seeing these white figures coming into the hospital room, and I wasn't scared. It felt very comforting. It felt very warm. Looking back at it, I obviously realized it was, however you want to refer to it, as angels or something protective to make sure I was okay. And then following that, I vividly remember a man coming into my room every single night. And it was strange because from far away, he reminded me of my mother, which I know is strange, but it was this man who reminded me of my mom, and he felt very familiar to me. But as a child, not knowing who this was approaching me in my room, I would get scared and I'd hide under the covers and wait for him to go away. And it happened, I'm talking nightly, for years. And I remember finally sitting up and just being like, what are you, who are you? What are you doing? And I remember him coming and sitting on my bed and basically explaining to me how he passed. I remember what he was wearing. He basically told me, I just want to make sure you're okay. I'm coming to check on you. And it was a very comforting feeling, and come to find out, when I finally expressed this to my mom, it was an uncle of mine, so her brother, who passed before I was born.
Wow.
He died in the house, and the house that we grew up in is very active, if you want to talk paranormal activity, very active with spirit, with history, constantly things happening, as time went on, and things that I started to realize. But my uncle did die in that house. He died. We lived, the typical Italians. My grandmother was down here. We were up here. The house next door was, it used to be my uncle, my nanny, all these people. So there was a lot of history there. And so my mom expressed how there was these different things that happened in the house. And I think it was from there I really realized what I was seeing, that they weren't living people. I thought at the time maybe everybody saw those things, being a child. Like, what do you mean you can't? She maintained a level of faith and stuff, and really followed, I think, textbook, the Catholic and, you know, Christian beliefs. So she would try to discount everything. However, she would have dreams and premonitions, and she'd call people out on everything. And then she would talk about seeing and feeling spirit, or somebody grabbed her foot at the end of the bed. And it was always, it was my imagination. Now looking forward, I'm like, that's BS. But, you know, I think she had it. My mother's also a medium. The difference between my mom and my grandmother is my mother now has used it, and she continues to use it and enhanced it throughout her life. And I think I was kind of the person that came along in her life to say, you're not crazy. You know, I have it too. And so I really feel that it's run on my mom's side of the family more so on the women's side.
Yeah. Now, what about your boys?
My oldest.
You feel your oldest, you could feel it?
Oh, I know it. My other grandmother on my father's side, she passed, I don't know, 2 years ago now. So he had to have been, what was he, three or four? He was about 3 or 4 when she passed. And I vividly remember the night before. Now, mind you, my grandmother was not sick. You know, she was getting up in age, but I mean, she was doing Zumba. She was in a choir at church. Like, she was active. She was not at all sick. And one night my son looked at me and he said, why is Nana Alanda going to go to see the angels? And I'm looking at him and I'm like, she's not. She's fine. Nana's fine, you know. And I tried to play it up, but then that started getting me to think. I'm like, what is he feeling, you know? The following morning, I was getting him ready to go to preschool. And he looks at me and he goes, Nana left. She's with the angels now. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, and I pick the phone up and I call my father. And my father, that day was a Wednesday. I'll never forget it, because he goes to pick her up and brings her. My father was a teacher in the district, and he would pick her up to bring her. And I called my father. He was there with the ambulance at the time.
Oh, wow.
He walked in to find her collapsed on the floor. And so my son knew, and I remember that was kind of, I knew he was special. And I know every mother says this about their child. And I have another son, and this is not me picking favorites. I just knew that when my first son was born, there was something special about him. I felt that he carried the gift, and that, I think that moment solidified that for me to know that it was the truth. He has the same gift as me.
I always found it interesting because it seems to be a generational thing. You know, I've met a lot of people that do what you do. Yeah. And they all talk about somebody in their family a generation before that had it. Many times they didn't use it. Right. You know what I mean? And I found it very, very common in Italian families with the females. Yes. And I mean, predominantly, I mean, like so many Italian women, I mean, you are, like yourself, are very, very well-known psychic mediums. I mean, you got people like yourself. Yeah. There's Kim Russo. Right. Teresa, the Long Island medium's Italian. Mary Acino, she's a very well-established psychic medium. Josephine Generelli. I can go on and on and on. I've met so many of them that just happen to be Italian women. I don't know why it's like that, but the best I've found that the best psychic mediums happen to be Italian women. Yeah, and, it's so crazy that you brought that up, because I've been really thinking about that. Now, I know when, you know, our generations prior came here, a lot of them came to New York. You know, my family, I still have people in New Jersey and Manhattan, and my aunt's from Long Island. And so that, you know, we're here in Buffalo, obviously, and Niagara Falls used to be Niagara Falls and Buffalo both have a big community of Italian, more so back then. But when they came here, a lot of them came to New York, right? And you're finding, and you look at all these people, the wonderful people that you just named, they're all Italian. They're all from like New York, New Jersey. You know, and I'm starting to see this pattern of these women coming out of these areas that have the same ability. But then I look at my family that I still have in Italy. So I have the ones that I'm more close with are in Naples, and I've done readings for them, you know, over there, and I'm finding that they're very into that. You know, they're very into it. And Italy in general, they believe in that very much so. Yeah, my first experience was with a an Italian woman in the Bronx. I was in college, and I didn't have any experience or knowledge or curiosity at all. And there was a girl that I went to college with, and she says, you know, I made an appointment for you and I meet this woman in the Bronx. And she was, even at that time, she was in her late 70s. She lived pretty long. And she was old school Italian to the hilt. You sat down, she gave you a cup of espresso, and you drank it. And she read the coffee grinds.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, she just looked at it, she moved it around a little bit with a little spoon. She was, you know, and drank it, and it was so bizarre for your first experience like that. And she was so accurate. And that was my first experience, and I was like, wow, I want to know. I want to know more about this. What's going on, you know? Yeah. And at the time, you know, I was, you know, that is like the late 70s, you know, there wasn't a lot of open minds to that. There were no TV shows. Nobody figured out how to monetize it. You know what I mean? Right. So, you know, people were just like, you know, hey, that's that weirdo, you know.